Laundry. It's time for another Flying Friday update, and in my hands is the E-Flite Pawnee Brave Night Flyer. They said the beginning of December, and they meant it. So we have been talking about this plane for a while, and it is nice to finally have it in my possession. And I built it up last night after I picked it up, and it didn't go too bad. There are a couple minor issues I do want to talk about, and then there are some really cool issues I want to talk about. So basically, the build-up isn't bad. You assemble the wing, you put in your servos for your flaps, put it all together, and go piece by piece following the manual, which is very well laid out. The wing build-up is pretty simple. The first thing I did was obviously to put in the flaps. I'm not sure why they wouldn't just install flaps from factory. But basically all you have to do is the hardware is supplied, the linkage in that. You have to put your flaps in through the compartment here, the little compartment that locks it down, and route the servo wire into the wing, which is like the longest process, the whole thing. Join the wings together, set everything up, and run it in. So basically you have to supply the servos. I use some 10 centimeter extensions just to help get everything up into the cockpit. You almost don't need them, but it helped me identify between the ailerons and the servo flaps, and a Y connector for your channel 5. And you go through the manual and you set up your flaps for 0, 30%, 80%, depending on the orientation. So it's takeoff, landings kind of thing. Then it goes into the internal component just fine. The next thing that was a little bit of annoyance with this aircraft was the quality of the screws that they supplied, particularly for the tail setup, and most particularly for the landing gear. I ended up getting rid of the screws after I stripped 2 out and putting in some wood screws with Robinson heads, and so far that is a lot better solution. The screwdriver was just chewing it up. The supplied hardware was just absolutely chewing up those screws, and I was really concerned that I wouldn't be able to get them out if I ever had to take the landing gear off. In the tail, it's a long, thin servo screw, and you want to be careful when you set that up. There's a plastic block and a vertical stabilizer, and I almost suggest running the screwdriver in first to start, the thread, get the thread going. And after that, you install them and you hold them down, and you very carefully tighten them down on the two holes here. And why do I say careful? Because there are no spares included with this kit. You would expect an airplane of this cost and caliber to have a couple spares thrown in just for that reason. Or the hardware needs to be at a higher grade as far as I'm concerned. Wing screws are just fine, and everything goes inside the internal compartment and fits really well. All your wires run up. I still have to clean it up, but it's still in prep stage. You get your nice AS3X receiver. There's a module here which allows you to plug in your landing lights and your wingtip lights, and then there's a switch that lets you turn on and off the LED strips, which are, as you can see, everywhere throughout the plane. The only other thing that I'm not totally impressed with on this aircraft is the prop. I don't think it's quite up to snuff. It is a 10 by 8, and it is not, as far as I'm concerned, as good as the one that came with the Sukhoi 29, the Su-29 prop, which after a year of flying that airplane, I still haven't replaced the prop. That's how good it is, even after scrubbing it on the ground and everything. And then the only other little hiccup, and I'm not sure why they would have done that, is the spinner. It's pressed on. It's not bolted on or nothing, and I could snap that off in a second if I wanted to. I don't want to because I don't want to wear on the pins on it. So my suspicion is after these 2 props are worn out, I'll probably go to like 11 by 6 or 11 by 8 or whatever with a new spinner, just to avoid any potential losing that in the field if something ever got knocked off in flight. But I don't know. Maybe it's perfectly fine and I'm overreacting, but it's one of those things where I'm like, it's a nice quality, high quality Z-foam constructed plane, and why are we cutting corners with that stuff? That's just my opinion at this point. I will fly it this weekend, and then I will have a full assessment of what this thing is and how it flies. My honest hope is that it fits in right between my other winter planes and is an able-bodied, all-wound, well-suited plane for that. Because my Sky Mule and my Fun Cub are rather large airplanes, so putting both of them in the car is a bit of work. So if this one is here, I have, I can take the Sky Mule or Fun Cub, one or the other, and then I have this guy. I can fly with my transmitter and have a great time. The wheels on this airplane right now are 2 3/4. I do have some 3-inch wheels, and I will try it skis when we actually get snow. Fingers we don't. Fingers crossed we don't. The manual is fantastic. All I have to do now is set up that prop, do the balance of the prop, finish setting up the remote, and this thing is ready to go. Check my CG and all this and go over all the controls and everything, and it is ready to fly tomorrow. So we will do the Maiden Flight. We'll get some video recorded of it and have a good time with it. So really looking forward to it. I'm impressed. Like I said, it looks beautiful. And it really is a sharp looking plane and a welcome addition to the fleet. I've waited for this one for a while, and we're going to see how it handles. If the weather conditions are good and I'm feeling really good, I think the P40 may even get put into the air. So I got to make sure all my batteries are charged after I finish this update. Sunday or earlier this week, we talked to David Vindestol on the podcast, so that's just been released today. And I was inspired enough over the weekend that I started working on the APM quad again and doing things like setting up some new hardware on the gimbal, rebalancing stuff, and just getting it back together. Not sure when it's going to go back in the air, but I did things like I put a foam piece on top to try and help the barometer and keep setting up and trying the balance and everything on this. So eventually this aircraft will make it back in the air. When? Not sure quite yet, but looking forward to it. I also have on the bench behind me the 3D plane Scott sent me, so I'm going to start working on that. And this weekend I do hope to go flying FPV with the blunt nose Versa wing from Flight Test. So there you go. I've had a pretty wild week. I'm looking forward to getting flying this weekend. Both days are looking really good temperature-wise and condition-wise, low winds and everything. So have a fantastic weekend. See you at the field. Thanks.